Okay, let's begin by talking about scatter plots, okay? Yeah, scatter plots and trend lines, okay? So, what is a scatter plot? What is a scatter plot? It's a plot of points that scatter. Okay, yeah, kind of, right? A scatter plot, it's a graph that just relates two quantities of data. That's all it does, right? And it's usually in the first quadrant because most of the points of data are positive, all right? So scatter plots can basically tend to look like three different graphs. So let me give you the options of what a scatter plot could look like for the most part. All right, so a scatter plot could look something like this, right? You have a bunch of different points here, and they're all kind of clustered together, and they're all kind of moving up, right? Or you could have a scatter plot that looks kind of like something like this, where the points are the data points are clustered together, and they're all kind of moving down. Or you could have a scatter plot that kind of looks like this, where the points are just kind of all over the map here, and they're not really related in any kind of way. Okay. The way that we would describe the first graph is a positive correlation. Okay, what does this mean? This would be a positive correlation. So what does that mean? That means that, as x increases, y tends to increase as well. Okay? So as x increases, y tends to increase as well. Okay, what do you think the second graph would be? A negative correlation. Yeah, you got it, right? A negative correlation. Now, I mean, you can also kind of relate to it. I mean, you can kind of say, like, well, if I was going to draw a line, if I drew a line that way, that line would have a positive slope. If I was going to draw a line this way, it would look like it would have a negative slope, so a negative correlation. Okay, so if I have a positive correlation and I have a negative correlation, well, what's the third one that I could possibly have over there? What do you guys think? Yeah, like no correlation, right? There's nothing right there. There's no correlation whatsoever that we could possibly imagine there, okay? So a scatter plot is just a bunch of data points, usually in the first quadrant, relating two sets of data, usually x to y, okay? Not a big deal. Scatter plots could have positive correlation, negative correlation, or no correlation, as we have seen. All right, so we're going to make a scatter plot. So we've been given some data, and the table shows the altitude of an airplane and the temperature outside the plane. That's what we're talking about here. So the altitude of the airplane and the temperature it tells us here is outside the plane. All right, we're going to make a scatter plot of altitude versus temperature. We're going to do this by hand first, and then I'm going to show you how to do it in the calculator second, okay? So let's get our range, or for our y-axis, our temperature. Our temperature goes from, what's our lowest temperature that you can see? Looks like 0.6. What's our highest temperature you can see? 61. Okay, good. So here we go. So let's scale this thing appropriately, right? Let's call that, let's go that 20. Let's call this 40. And let's call that 60. Okay, that should give us a pretty good representation. 20, 40, 60. That's degrees in Fahrenheit. Now for the altitude, we got to go all the way up from 0 to 5,000, right? So let's go by 1,000. So let's call that 1,000. Right there. Let's call this 2,000. Let's call this 3,000. Let's call this 4,000. And let's call that 5,000. Okay, let's do our best to make the scatter plot happen, okay? So at 0, we get what? 59 degrees. So 0, so that's somewhere like right about there, okay? Good. At 500 meters, what are we at? So 500, so that's kind of like right about there. Okay, at 1,000, where are we at? So a little bit higher at 1,000, so we're like right about there. Okay, good. At 1,500, where are we at? 55, good. So I'm going to put that in there as well. So that's probably something like about that. 2,000, where are we at? 41, okay, good. So it puts me there, say. 2,500, where are we at? 29, right? So I'm like down here a little bit. 3,000, where are we at? 29 again, so kind of similar to that. Okay, 3,500, we're at 18, so that's below the 20 mark. At 4,000, we're back up at 26, so that's kind of like, that'd be right about there, I suppose, if I'm in there. At 4,500, I'm at 12, so that's about here. And then at 5,000, I'm at what? 0.6. That's way down here. Okay, good. All right, so we've created a scatter plot. We're taking altitude versus temperature. All right, so what type of relationship do you think the scatter plot kind of shows? What would you say? Positive correlation, negative correlation, or no correlation? I would tend to say it's negative, right? The temperature outside the plane tends to decrease, right, as the altitude of the plane increases. So it tends to be decreasing, so therefore we could say it kind of has a trend downward like this. And we would say there's sort of a negative correlation. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to make this graph on the graphing calculator. So those of you who have the graphing calculator, I want you to follow along with me. Those of you who do not have a calculator, this lesson is being recorded, so you need to make sure that you can follow these steps, and you might want to just jot down some buttons as we go. So let me get my calculator out. This is mine. And I'll show you exactly, walk you through how to make this in the calculator, the stat plot, and so on and so forth. So let me bring this over here. Yeah, the silver edition, right? Actually, let me make this a little bit smaller. Okay, so I can fit all of this into one screen for us, okay? There we go. That's pretty darn good. That's about as good as I can get it, okay? So I'm gonna start with a clear calculator. Okay, and what you want to do to get this, what we essentially are doing is we're gonna plot some points, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna end up pushing this stat button over here, okay? And when I push a button on the calculator, like the last button I push always ends up being in red, right? So no matter where I am, whatever button I'm pushing, it ends up being in red, so you can follow along as well, where I was doing, okay? So here we go, stat button. Okay, so you should see this screen. It should say edit, calc, test, so on and so forth. We want to edit. It's already highlighted, so I'm going to push enter. Okay, so you should see a bunch of lists here, all right? If your lists have any numbers in them, does anybody's list have a number in them? Okay, so all I gotta do is go to the top, go to highlight it, and then push delete. So I'll show you. So let's say if I had 2, 6, and 3, let's say I had some numbers in my list here. If I go to the top of my list, okay, on the top I could just hit clear and then push enter, and it will clear the whole thing out. Okay, so far so good. So make sure that you're in L1, right? L1 stands for list number 1, all right? We're going to put our X variable, or in this case, that would be altitude in there. So we're going to go 0, 500, all the way up to 5,000. Make sure you don't miss any increments, okay? So everybody right now, here's how you entered in. So watch it. I'm going to put 0. Notice 0 comes up in L1, and then I push enter. And look, it appears in my list. Then I want 500, so I'll put 500. And then push enter, and it appears in the list. You guys get it? Okay, so what I want you to do is enter all of those in right now. I'll pause the video. You shouldn't have 12. You should have 11 sets of data in there, okay? So L1 is going to represent the altitude. Okay, now you should have all those 11 sets of data. I'm going to move my cursor to the right, and that's going to put me underneath L2. So what do you suppose we're going to put in L2? We're going to put the temperatures. Yeah, so we're going to put temperatures in L2. So go ahead and enter it. So here we go. I do 59. Push enter, and it appears in my list. And then go ahead and enter those all the way down. Okay, so you should have 11 sets of data in list number 2 as well. So if we scroll all the way up, we should see all these correlations here. So basically what we're doing is we're putting X and Y pairs into the calculator, okay? Now that we've done that, we're going to hit second quit. Okay, second quit. That should bring us back to the main home screen. It doesn't delete our lists. Our lists are still stored into the calculator. Now we can do something with these lists, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to we're going to go second stat plot, which is the Y equals button. So we hit the second and then the Y equals button, because that activates the blue lettering up above. See how it says like stat plot? And you should see this window. Does everybody see this window? Okay, it is the stat plots and so on. And right now mine says plot number 1 is off, and yours should say the same thing. If it doesn't, that's okay, we can fix it, but yours should say plot off. And then I have plot 2 and plot 3. And so you can plot up to 4 different plots at once on one graph. Well, we're only going to graph 1 for right now. So with the number 1 highlighted, you should just push enter, and you should see this screen right here. So Once we have here, we're going to turn our plots on by just pushing the enter button. So now my plots have gone from off to on. Okay? And then your calculator can plot many different types of graphs. It could make, for example, a scatter plot, or it can make a line graph, or it can make a bar graph, or it can make a box and whiskers, or a modified box plot, or all kinds of things here. So we just want the first one. It's a box plot. And notice that the X list is gonna graph everything in L1. That's all the data stored in list 1. And notice our Y list is L2. That's all the data that's been stored in list number 2. So you have to put the data into the calculator first and then tell it which list that you want. Well, by default, it's always list 1 and list 2, so that's why I always teach my students to just use list 1 and list 2. But you can change this if you needed to. Okay, so everything else should stay the same. You can mess with the settings, like you can change the marks to different things. You can change the color. It doesn't really matter what color it is. Mine's blue. You can change yours to whatever you want. If you don't have the color screen, it's just kind of black and white anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So once I've got all this, once I've turned my plots on, okay, I have now set the calculator up to graph. So here's what we do. How do we graph this thing? So if you go to the graph button, oh shoot, sorry. Sorry, if you go to the where do we go? Sorry, zoom. There we go. Okay. And if you go to the zoom button, and we want zoom number 9 because it says zoom stat. Okay. When we push that, our stat plot should show up. Okay, so take a look. Take a look at our graph that we created. Take a look at the graph that the calculator created. Are they pretty similar? Yeah, they are pretty similar, okay? So we have now created a stat plot inside our calculator that is similar to the one that we've done here, all right? All right, so far so good? Okay, so what I'm going to have you do now is I'm going to have you practice this on your own, okay, at the tables. So those who don't have calculators, maybe you guys can like do one and then rotate so we can all kind of get some practice in right now, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, you should have this on your graph for this scatter plot here. So this is money spent versus gallons bought. We should have something that looks like this. Is this true? Yes. Okay, so right now we can all make a scatter plot. Okay, so once we can all make a scatter plot, okay, the next thing that we always talk about in scatter plots is something that's called the line of best fit or the trend line, okay? So I'm going to show you how to create the line of best fit from this, all right? So we think that, how would you describe this data? What kind of correlation? Positive. This would be a positive correlation, and I would agree with you. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're gonna actually graph in the line of best fit on top of our calculator screen here and show you how to do that, all right? Here's what you're going to do. You are going to go to the stat button, okay? Go back to the stat button. Everybody with me? Okay, now notice at the top you have edit, you have calc, and you have tests. These are your tabs at the top, and then these are your options in each tab. So move your cursor by pushing the right button over to calc. Okay? Over to calc. Notice that I have that tab is highlighted, and I have some new options here, right? I have some new options, okay? Are we all here? Okay, okay, good. Now, look at the options. We have one variable statistics. That would give us a mean, median, mode, and all that sort of stuff. But if we cruise on down to option number 4, notice it says lin reg, and then in parentheses, ax plus b. That stands for a linear regression line, or a line of best fit, okay, that, as the book is using it for now. That's the one that we want. We want a lin reg, linear regression line. So we're going to move our cursor down and highlight option number 4. Okay? Once we've highlighted option number 4, we push enter. Okay? And then it tells us, mine happens to say list 1 for list 2, and of course that's all that we want. Yours might not happen to say that. All you have to do at this point is push enter again. You don't need to do anything else. Push enter again. Notice that it brings you down to list number 2. Push enter again. Frequency, like how often, just leave it alone, don't do anything. Enter again, and then finally you get to calculate, which is the one that we really want, and then we push enter. So, calculator does some thinking, and it gives us y equals ax plus b. And notice it says that a is 0.2444, blah, 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 blah. and B is 1.2. Now, if your data isn't the same as my data, you're going to have different values here for the A and for the B. Okay, so at this point, what we do is we write down, okay, we get on a piece of paper somewhere, we write down y equals AX plus B. And we ask our calculator, what was the value of A? And we'll round to 4 decimal places, so 0.2444, okay? So this is going to be y equals 0.2444x plus what was the value of B? It's 0.1232 plus 0.1232. So you just write it down somewhere so you don't forget. And then you actually go back to the y equals button, and we're going to graph a line over our data points. So this is the answer. This is what we want. The 0.2444x plus 0.1232. This would be the line, the linear regression line. And let's show you what it does. So if I plot this back in, I would get 0.2444x plus 0.1232. So that's why it's important. That's why I write it down.
Mine says something on it. It says 16E. Can I make it clear?
Yeah, I'll help you out because you have that data point that's messed up, so it's messing this up too.
What do we do after the linear regression?
All right, so here's what you do. All you have to do now is hit the graph button, and look what happens, okay? The calculator,
It drew a line.
of course it draws a line, okay? So the calculator, this is the line. This is the equation, the line of best fit. It's the line that best approximates the data, okay? That's our trend line right there, okay? Okay, we'll do this together. Okay, for those of you who don't have the calculator, you should watch the video. You should watch box number 4. So this is what I expect you to do. I'm going to give you some data. You got to make a scatter plot on the screen, get the line of best fit, and write the line of best fit. Okay? So here we go. So I'm going to go to Stat. I'm going to go to Edit. Okay? I have some information in my lists. I'm going to clear them out by going to the top, hitting the clear button, and pushing Enter. I'm going to go over here to list number 2. Go to the top, push the clear button, push Enter, and my lists get cleared out. I'm going to enter list 1, the age. So it's going to be 1, Enter, 2, Enter, 3, Enter, 4, Enter, 6, Enter, 8, Enter, 10, Enter, 12, Enter. I'm going to go to list number 2. I'm going to punch in the weights of my panda bear here. So I have, oh, where'd you go? I don't know why it does that. Okay, here we go. I'm going to go 2.5. Enter. 7.6. Enter. 12.5. Enter. 17.1. Enter. 24.3. Enter. 37. What is it? 0.9. Enter. 49.2. Enter. 54.9. Enter. Okay, there we go. All my data is entered in list 1 and list 2. From this point, my stat plots is already turned on. I can check to just go second stat plot. Yep, my stat plot's already turned on. No big deal. I've already got that. So I can just go straight to Zoom 9. And the calculator makes the scatter plot for me. Now, wait. Okay, you guys are asking what this line is. Yeah, you know what line that is? That's the line from the last problem that we did, right? So I can easily get rid of that line by going to y equals. Look, it's still sorted underneath the y equals screen, so I'll just clear it out, okay? Just go to y equals and clear it out. Then when I go back to Zoom 9, I just have my scatter plot, okay? I just have my scatter plot. We good so far? Okay, now we're going to make the line of best fit. So how do I do that? I go to Stat, and underneath the Calculate button, go over to Calculate. I want option number 4, LinReg, linear regression line. So I push option number 4, and I can just move my calculator screen all the way down to Calculate, or I can just keep pushing Enter. Either way, it gets you down here. Once you're at Calculate, you push the Enter button, and it creates a 4.92 and then a negative 2.548. So I suggest that you write that down somewhere. All right, so we have a 4.921 and a negative 2.548. So when I go back to y equals, I can actually graph that line. So it was, help me out, what was it?
It was
4.921 x. And then plus, what was my b value? Okay, so I could just, instead of plus, I just use minus. So minus 0.2, oh, 2 point, this is why I should write down, 2.548. Okay.
Is there a way to just delete like the last number that you just put? Yeah. Okay, clear.
And then when you hit graph, the line is the best fit to the data.